Did anybody catch Aldi's wine promotion? Now I know they don't have stores here. It's their holiday pack, 12 bottles of wine, and you don't know for sure what you're getting. And it's sold at rock bottom prices. People line up before the store opens to get in line to buy this stuff. And I think they also have a holiday cheese pack as well. Okay, the one I was most interested in was CVS, the drugstore chain, right? Well, when we did retailing, I said I didn't have them in my top 10 because I said they're not really a retailer. And why were they in the news last Thursday and Friday? They acquired what? An insurance company. So it's going to be a combination of a retailer, an insurance company, clinics in the store, and a pharmacy benefits manager that they acquired a few years ago. So they call the company CVS Health. It's way more than a drugstore. Now today, a federal judge has blocked the merger. I wonder if this is one of the judges that Trump targets, the Ninth Circuit or whatever it is that he's after. But the judge is afraid that this will lead to uncompetitive activity. Walgreens has done somewhat the same thing, except they don't have an insurance company. They've got a deal with a European pharmacy chain, Boots. They've also got a deal with a pharmacy benefits manager, and they own a certain stake in some medical device manufacturers. So they've got their hands in a bunch of this stuff too. And if all these mergers went through, and the Rite Aid Walgreens deal still hasn't closed, those two companies would control around 75% of all the retail drug distribution in the United States. Well, with all this political rhetoric about health care being the most important issue, the Democrats staking their reputation on that for 2020 and so on, that's certainly a big deal. You know, it's not just drug companies that are gouging consumers. And in fact, I think Trump had an ad out over the weekend saying he's going to stand up to drug companies. Now, as we said last time, drug companies spend 4 times more on personal selling than they do on advertising. But if you watched any of the football games over the weekend, you saw all these 2-minute ads for pharmaceuticals. You know, it's 15 minutes, or rather 15 seconds to tell you what the product does, and it's a minute and 45 seconds to tell you all the side effects. So nobody would really want to take that drug if they really thought that they were going to suffer any of the side effects. So all this healthcare stuff, it's, you know, it's peripheral to marketing, but the retailing part of it is of interest to me because it's boiling down, just like in other areas of retailing. There's going to be 2 or 3 chains that control everything. CVS now runs Target's pharmacies. So that's part of CVS. It used to be, let's say 25 years ago, all the retailers had their own pharmaceutical operations, but they've gotten out of it. They've turned it over to Walgreens and CVS, and there have been mergers. Long's Drug in California is part of CVS, and Walgreens has bought up some regional chains as well. Okay, end of story. Question for you, when is the final? Wednesday, a week from Wednesday, the 13th at 3:10 in this room. I get all sorts of odd emails like, where is the final? Well, it's in a room with 180 seats, and this is the only one in the building. And we do not have class on Monday. That's also an odd question. We don't hold classes during finals week, or we're not supposed to. So Wednesday, we're going to see a video on sales management. Then we're going to go over the study guide, some sample questions, and have a short lecture on marketing planning, chapter 22 in the book. Also, if you've looked at the study guide, it says there's an advertising video on a company called Fallon. We're not going to see that, so that's not going to be on the test. There's just going to be 2 videos on the test, the sales management video and Mall of America. So any questions on that?
3 o'clock, right? 3 o'clock?
3:10. They schedule them so that there can't be a conflict in the room with 2 classes in the room at the same time. But it's still only a 60-minute exam. So it's 3:10 to 4:10. We'll try to get the grades done Wednesday night. I've got a grade essay test in my other class, and I want to get this one out of the way. Get all the grades done hopefully by Thursday. Now there's a problem. They just rolled out a new version of My UNLV last week. Has anybody tried it?
Yeah.
Does it work?
But they have the class version here. You can give back to like the regular.
Okay, they send out emails to the faculty and the staff, and apparently there were some problems on Friday. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm gonna do that tomorrow. But in the past, there have always been problems with both Web Campus, which is now Canvas, and My UNLV. So we'll put the raw scores out on Canvas, and then I'll submit the grades on My UNLV. And the way it used to work is, if you submitted the grades, let's say at 7 o'clock at night, they'd be available in the morning. So you have your grade by the morning. Okay, and we can talk about grading and stuff on Wednesday if you want to. Today we're gonna pick up sales management. And if you've looked in the book, chapter 20, there's like a paragraph on each one of these topics we're gonna talk about today, which is really sort of criminal. They go on and on about a bunch of stuff in that chapter that to me is inconsequential. And then the really important stuff they don't cover. If you were to take the sales management class, Marketing 465, we would spend a week on recruiting, a week on training, and a week on motivation and compensation. Those are big deals. Well, why do I have Joel Osteen up here? What business is he in? What does he sell? Does he really? What else does he sell? Where does he make most of his money? From his books. And what are the topics of his books? Motivation, success. And he goes around and gives seminars. He's been in Las Vegas giving these, and he goes to the Orleans Arena and he does a speech, and his wife does a speech, and then they sell their books. But a lot of it is motivational speaking. If you ever have 60 minutes on a Sunday morning that you want to sacrifice, listen to Joel Osteen and kind of keep a clock and see how much time he spends on religion out of the 60 minutes. It won't be a lot. Every once in a while he throws in a scripture, or Jesus said this, or something like that, but it's really more business oriented. Anyway, motivation. So first, recruiting. And again, all these are standalone topics. Sales and marketing management is sort of the Bible of sales managers. It's kind of halfway between a magazine and a journal. It's a little bit more technical than a magazine. And you can buy this at the airport. You typically can't buy it in grocery stores. It's targeted at people that are involved in selling, sales and marketing management. And every year they do an issue, the 25 best sales courses. And this is kind of like the top 25 in the football poll. And everybody fights over who's number 4, number 5, or number 6. But every year they do this poll. They poll various sales managers and come up with a ranking. And it's pretty much the usual cast of characters that are in there every year. Cisco Systems, Frito-Lay, Northwestern Mutual Life, the quiet company. You don't hear much about them anymore. Pfizer, Intel, Merck, a lot of drug companies in here because they spend a lot of money on sales. So what we're going to talk about now is how do you get to have a good sales force? Well, recruiting is the lifeblood, and we're gonna do lots of sports analogies today. So just like the NFL, you've gotta have constant turnover of people and bring in new blood, so to speak. So we've got this thing called turnover. Well, what could cause turnover in a sales force? What are the possibilities? You've got a 1,000-person sales force with a turnover rate of X. What could cause turnover? Somebody gets fired. Somebody gets promoted. Somebody quits and leaves for another job. Somebody retires. Somebody gets sick and can't work. Somebody dies. Somebody goes to jail. All these things happen in a big population. The same with franchising. When you've got a big population, there's always something going on. So, as a result, we have this thing called turnover. And in professional sales forces, the ones that we defined last time, the average turnover rate in the United States is somewhere between 10 and 15%. Higher in some industries than others, higher in some companies than others, but 10 to 15%. So let's say your sales force is 1,000 people. How many new people do you have to hire every year? 100 to 150. What if you're like Pfizer and you've got 10,000 salespeople? All of a sudden, we're talking about a lot of people to be recruited every year, over 1,000 people. And even if you've only got a sales force of 100, you're talking 10 to 15. Okay, what does it cost you to do this? Well, one of the obvious turnover costs is recruiting. You're gonna have to somehow advertise the position, screen candidates, interview candidates, maybe have a second interview with candidates, maybe have them take a pre-employment physical, maybe move them from one part of the country to another. And that's just to get them on the job without any training. But there are also hidden costs of turnover. And what would they be? A hidden cost. Well, maybe they don't get along with the new people.
Onboarding of the new employees.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the same thing. But how about in the interim? Let's say a salesperson gets fired. How long does it take you to hire another one? Maybe 3 months, maybe 2 months. What happens to that territory in the meantime? You know, either the manager, the district manager is gonna have to cover it, or some other salesperson nearby is gonna have to cover it, but they already have full-time jobs. So the territory is not gonna be worked as hard as it would be. Then, when the new person shows up, depending on the level of experience that they have, maybe the territory isn't gonna be productive for a period of time. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Let's say you get a job as a salesperson in Los Angeles, and you've never lived there. What's the first thing you have to learn how to do? Drive around town. You know, how do I get to my sales calls? Well, at certain times of the day, I can't take this particular freeway. The traffic is too bad. So you have to learn really basic things. And even if you're not in a situation like that, you have to learn the territory. You have to meet all the people. You have to learn their business. Now, if you've got experience in the industry, that's gonna be easy. So there's hidden costs of turnover as well. If you've got a territory that's got turnover, that territory is probably gonna be an underperformer for a certain period of time. And again, sales managers get mountains of statistics on this. So they can look at a territory on Monday morning and say that territory is not doing very well. Well, okay, if nobody's in it, that's a pretty good explanation. Studies have been done across all these professional sales forces, and they try to come up with a number for what turnover costs in that industry or in that company. And oftentimes they'll peg it to an average salary. So a company might use a figure of 150% of a salesperson's annual salary. And that's the turnover cost, and they've got data to back that up. So if the average salesperson, let's say without commissions, makes $60,000 a year, 150% of that is $90,000. So every turnover costs you $90,000. So the goal would be not to have any turnover, right? Just like in the NFL, you don't want to have any turnover. Like Jacksonville, for all of you NFL fans, they had no turnover between last year and this year. How are they doing? Terrible, even though they won yesterday. So why are they doing terrible if they didn't have any turnover?
Mortals regress.
That's part of it. The team is stagnant. They had no new blood. I'm not sure what the average is in the NFL, but it's probably 10 to 20% turnover. On a 50-some-odd player roster, you're going to have 5 to 10 new players a year. Even the Patriots have turnover. So this whole idea of turnover is a two-edged sword. You can avoid turnover, but maybe you don't want to avoid all turnover. Maybe you want a little bit, some, to bring new blood into the organization, so to speak. Okay, the general process in sales recruiting is number one, like everything else, have a job analysis and a job description. Everybody's got a job description someplace. Your dog has a job description. You know, what is your dog supposed to do? Guard the house, chew bones, dig holes, stuff like that. Dog stuff. Okay. Well, salespeople and NFL players also have job descriptions. Number two, set selection criteria. We're going to set up a profile, quote unquote profile, of our ideal candidate. And then we're going to build a pool of recruits to fit that profile. So the NFL has various profiles for different positions: quarterback, linebacker, wide receiver. And if you don't fit the profile, you're not going to get drafted, you're not going to be on the team. So how do they determine the profile? Let's talk about quarterbacks. Everybody knows quarterbacks. What's one of the big factors for quarterbacks? Height. And how tall do you want them to be? 6'4". That would be ideal. What if they're short, like Drew Brees?
Russell Wilson. They can still play in the league, just depends on their accuracy.
Okay, but they wouldn't be necessarily viewed as an ideal candidate. You can also be too tall. There's a couple of quarterbacks that are 6'7".
Rob Oscar, they're 6'7".
Right, and occasionally you'll have somebody that's really tall. But you develop a profile, really like them to be, I don't know, 6'2" to 6'5". Where do they come up with that number? They pull it out of thin air?
Like, what are they doing?
Well, how do they know that a 5'5" quarterback isn't going to work?
You can't say a roll on.
Well, how do they know that?
Historical data.
From history, yeah, from data. So they've got data that indicates that the quarterback should be this profile. They'd have a different profile for a wide receiver. And later on, they're going to test them to see if they fit that profile. Well, the same in sales. You're going to have indicators that you've developed over time that indicate what a successful salesperson should look like. And if you're Pfizer and you're hiring 1,000 people a year, you've got a lot of data. Just look at the last 10 years worth of data. You've got 10,000 hires, and you can look at test scores and education and all sorts of stuff like that and develop a profile. Now Excel Corporation, which is part of Procter & Gamble now, has a profile that they want ideally a marketing or general business major with a GPA between 2.7 and 3.2. Why don't they want somebody with a 2.0? They haven't worked out in the past, and you could speculate as to why that was. Maybe they're lazy, maybe they're stupid. How about somebody with a 4.0? They don't want them either. Maybe they'd be bored in the job. Maybe they wanna quit and go back to grad school, something like that. The data tell them that. They say, okay, we've hired these people in the past, it hasn't worked out, here's our profile. Now, what other organizations that you're familiar with do profiling, where it's a bad word? The police, law enforcement, they profile criminals. Same deal, you're gonna look at the data and you're gonna see what's happened in the past. Okay, so you're gonna set the selection criteria, then you're gonna build a pool of recruits, and we're gonna talk in a minute about where you would get recruits. Where does the NFL get their recruits? College football, primarily. Where does the National Hockey League get their recruits? A variety of places. US colleges, Canadian junior leagues, European leagues, even a few high school players. So it's a more diverse set of people, but they've also got a profile as to what works and what doesn't, based on years of data. So you're gonna build your pool of recruits, and this guy, I believe, is out of the league now. Does anybody know? Yeah, he was a controversial draft choice for the Chargers. Played, I think, for the Saints, and I think he's gone now. Okay, and then the last step, decide on who you want to hire, and close the deal, hire them. Well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? If any of you are interviewing for accounting jobs, and somebody offers you the job, you're gonna take the best offer that you get, right? You've always wanted to be an accountant. That's not true in sales. A lot of people interview for the jobs and they don't really want to be in sales. Like we talked about last time, that they're treating sales as a backup job or a backup career. They don't really want to do it. They went to college. No, I don't really want to be in sales. So you might have to convince them to be in sales and to be in sales with you. So it's a little bit tougher sell than in other occupations, because of the negative connotation that some people have, especially college students, about sales. Okay, let's move on. Sources of recruits. Number one, your current employees. 75% of firms hire at least some of their own employees to be salespeople. And this is regarded as a promotion. They can make more money, have more advancement in a sales career. This could also include relatives and friends of employees or acquaintances, or maybe current salespeople are in contact with other salespeople. It's kind of a network, but it's people that you already know something about. So what would the advantage be to hiring somebody that's already at work in your company for a sales job? What do you know about them? Their track record. Do they show up for work on time? Do they take a lot of sick days? Do they get along with other employees? Also, they would probably know about the company culture. They would probably know people within the firm so that they can get things done if they have a problem. They probably know at least something about the products and the competitors and the industry. So they should be easier to train. Now, what's the downside?
So we're gonna fill a position.
Okay, now you're creating another vacancy. You hire somebody out of customer service to go into sales, and now you've got to fill that job. Also, it can create jealousy among the people that don't get hired within the firm. And probably the biggest argument is an inbreeding argument, where you're not bringing people in from the outside. Everybody within the company has the same attitude, sort of, anyway. So it's like animals that are inbred. What happens to them? They're weak, they get sick. So that's an inbreeding argument. Okay, number two, and this is the most controversial one, hire from your competitors. Poach their salespeople. And this is the New York Yankees. This is the best analogy here. You wait until somebody becomes successful with another team, and then you go and hire them. And the Yankees have unlimited money. So you're gonna steal somebody else's salesperson. What are they gonna do? Maybe come back and steal one of yours. So everybody's right back where they started. There's also an ethical dilemma here as to whether or not you should be hiring competitor salespeople because they have trade secrets, they have inside information on the industry.
They do have a non-compete agreement, of course.
Sometimes, some of the salespeople will have a contract that says you can't do that. There are non-compete agreements in a lot of jobs. Now, again, we've got a good example in the NFL. You seem to be an NFL expert. And what's the current controversy?
I don't know which one.
Hugh Jackson, the coach of the Browns, gets fired. And the Bengals hire him, and they're in the same division. Now there's a rumor today that McCarthy, that got fired by the Packers, might go to the Vikings. And they're in the same division. So there's ethical issues here. And as a matter of fact, there was a big debate last week in the sports media about whether or not what the Bengals did was ethical, hiring a competitor's coach. Well, the same here in sales. And oftentimes it's a thinly veiled ruse, R-U-S-E, to get that competitor's relationships or customers. Or you're gonna hire a salesperson just to get their customers. That's what you want. And there have been some interesting lawsuits over the years on this. You know, in the auto industry, this guy with Nissan is in trouble now, but there was one at Volkswagen maybe 10 years ago, and General Motors sued Volkswagen and won the suit. You know, it's that type of an arrangement where they pirated away an employee, more or less just to get customers and relationships and to steal trade secrets. Okay, universities, this is the one you're interested in. Well, if you decide you're gonna try to hire from universities, number one, those people are gonna be resistant to interviewing for sales jobs because the perception of sales is very negative. Number two, it's a numbers game. Companies that do this will put recruiters on the road for, let's say, 10 weeks a semester. Very expensive to do so. These recruiters are flying around the country, staying in hotels, using rental cars, you know, eating meals. And what's the success rate of that? Very low. Only 1 out of 15 people that interviews for a sales job on a college campus gets a second interview. So if you've got 2 people recruiting at UNLV or at the University of Arizona, maybe they talk to 8 people a day, 16 total, only 1 of them gets a second interview for one reason or another. So it's very low probability, very expensive. Also, you're hiring people without experience. So you're gonna save some money on starting salary, but what are you gonna have to spend money on? Training, more training. Where if you hire competitors' salespeople, they've already got customers and relationships and they're trained, but you're gonna have to pay them more. You're gonna have to steal them away like the Yankees do. So some of the baseball teams, instead of spending money on players that are already established, will bring young players up through their system. And then when they become successful, the Yankees and the Dodgers hire them away. Okay, various ads and websites. This is totally out of control. It used to at least cost you the price of a stamp to apply for a job. Now it doesn't cost you even that. So firms are being swamped with online resumes. There are screening devices that companies use to sort resumes electronically. I had 2 recruiters in my morning class, Marketing 495, and they talked about this, about how they've devised application forms that lend themselves to this and various software that they use to sort the resumes. There's 2 or 3 types of software they can use to do it. And kind of the overall conclusion is if you don't have certain keywords in your application letter or your resume, it kicks you out. It used to be that human beings would sort applications into piles, you know, high, medium, low, something like that. Now, because of the volume of the transactions, a lot of it is electronic. Okay, then lastly, search firms. That's a nice term for an employment agency. And certain search firms specialize in sales jobs. And if they find a candidate and you hire that candidate, then you pay them a fee. But because they're involved in that industry all the time, they know the market, they know who's available, they know what the appropriate salary ranges are, they know whether or not you're gonna be able to fill the position for the amount of money that you wanna pay. So oftentimes, companies that don't have really big recruiting departments or some sort of infrastructure will tend to use those on a local level. Or maybe the district manager will retain somebody in, let's say, the Los Angeles area to find salespeople. And they can be effective screeners for the first step in the process, anyway. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Sales aptitude and selection tools. Well, one thing you could look at would be mental ability, another would be personality traits, and the third one would be skills. And lo and behold, the NFL does the same thing. Mental ability, and this was on a slide last time. What does the NFL use? What's the name of that test? No?
Wonderlic?
The Wonderlic.
Yeah, Wonderlic.
The Wonderlic. And you can go to their website, and they've been involved in a lot of controversies over the last 10 years. So now they're trying to pitch themselves as a benefits consulting firm where they do salary studies and things beyond testing. The name comes from a German psychologist in the 1930s that developed this test. The NFL started using it in the early 1990s, and sales managers have used it for a long time. It's a 50-question, multiple-choice test with a 12-minute time limit. So do the math, 50 questions in 12 minutes. How much time do you have for each question? Not very much. And the scores can range from 0 to 50. Sales managers believe in this test, and to get a reasonably good sales job, you have to do at least okay on the Wonderlic. And again, they've got data from everybody they've interviewed, everybody they've hired, and what does that translate into? Well, the NFL in the early 90s decided to start using this too. And if any of you follow the draft shows, which used to be exclusively on ESPN, they had Chris Berman and a couple of his buddies, and then Mel Kiper, the guy that's the big draft expert. And he rattles off these statistics about the players. And every once in a while, he'd pipe up with, oh, and he got a 38 on the Wonderlic. And everybody would look at him like, what's the Wonderlic? What are you talking about? And it's this mental ability test that has been used for a long time in sales, and now it's used by the NFL. And why do I have the Tennessee Titans logo up there? Who's the player? Quarterback. Vince Young. Remember Vince Young? Maybe that's a little bit dated, but it's the best example because when he came out of school, supposedly he got an 8 on the Wonderlic, out of 50, an 8. And all of a sudden the information gets leaked. Supposedly this information is confidential with the Wonderlic Corporation. But somebody leaked the information that Vince Young got an 8 on the Wonderlic. And he was rated as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks that year. And that was before there was a rookie salary cap. So the difference between being, let's say, a second round, or the second choice overall, and the 10th choice overall was huge. Millions and millions of dollars. And who leaked the information? Well, agents, probably. Agents that represented other players, because they wanted Vince Young to drop so their candidate could rise up in the rankings and get more money, and then they'd make more on commission from signing that player to a contract. So this whole thing was pretty much out of control. And this was in 2007. Remember, Vince Young scored the winning touchdown when Texas beat USC for the national championship in January 2007, I think it was. So it was a really big deal. Okay, there's all this controversy about the Wonderlic test. And the organization really didn't want any of that to come out because the data files had been breached and what was supposed to be confidential information. Okay, so the weekend version of the Wall Street Journal does this story, the NFL's smartest team. And they managed to get Wonderlic scores for all the NFL teams and for notable players, and there's tables in here. Now this is a little bit out of date. And they published that in the newspaper. Well, some interesting things. If you're not a football fan, I'm sorry I'm boring you with this, but some of this is pretty interesting. Currently, the highest Wonderlic score in the NFL is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Who knows who he is?
What's the Harvard?
Yeah, and he's got the beard, plays for Tampa Bay. He got a 48. He got a 48, that's the highest score in the league. Blaine Gabbert, who's a backup, got a 42. Alex Smith, now injured with the Redskins, got a 40. Eli Manning had a good day yesterday, got a 39. Rodgers got a 35. Breeze a 34. Brady a 33. Carson Wentz, big shot with the Eagles, he's on TV tonight, a 29. Peyton Manning got a 28, 11 points lower than Eli. Roethlisberger and Flacco both got 27s. Tim Tebow, a name from the past, got a 22. Donovan McNabb, a name from the past with the Eagles, got a 14. Okay, Vince Young gets an 8 the first time he takes it. Retakes it, gets a 16. So it's controversial. And right away, you know, people are attacking the test, saying, oh, it's obviously a discriminatory test, you know, for a variety of reasons. Now, the quarterbacks that came out last year, Josh Allen with the Bills, he had a good game yesterday. He got a 37. Rosen with the Cardinals got a 29. Sam Darnold got a 28. Baker Mayfield, supposedly a big shot now, got a 25. And Jackson, the guy with the Ravens, who now seems to be starring, only got a 13. They generally like quarterbacks to have scores over 20. Also, they like offensive linemen to have scores over 20. Now, how does this all relate back to football? This test, this 50-question test in 12 minutes. What's the rationale?
You could learn it quickly to develop teams and do the X's and O's go. That's
Well,
what the
yeah,
sports
yeah,
outside.
and quick decision making. In the NFL, you've got 3 or 4 seconds to decide what you're gonna do. So the quarterback has to know that, and the offensive linemen have to know it when they change plays and stuff like that. So they want the offensive linemen and the quarterbacks to have the highest scores. A couple other notable scores. Adrian Peterson got a 16. Percy Harvin, if anybody remembers him, got a 12. Now, one thing it seems to do is flag people that have trouble later on in their career. If you remember, Peterson was suspended for a year. Vince Young basically got run out of the Titans organization. Percy Harvin was on and off with 3 or 4 teams. So it seems to flag people that have a hard time making decisions, maybe, or there's something going on in their head that's not quite right. Now, as a result of all this criticism of the Wonderlic, there's a new test that's been developed called the AIQ. The Athletic Intellectual Quotient was developed by 2 psychologists, and some of the teams are using that. But in sales management, if you ever apply for a good sales job, you'll take the Wonderlic. And different companies have different standards or norms. You know, Procter & Gamble would have a norm of 25. Cisco Systems might have a norm of 30, something like that. Okay, that's mental ability. Personality traits. Well, Match.com. Who developed the Match.com questionnaire? Does anybody know? A famous anthropologist named Helen Fisher, who used to be at New York University, I believe she's at Rutgers now, and she's got the Fisher's Personality Inventory test that you can give to people. We could give this to you and see how you fit with other people. And what this does is it really puts you into a category based on how you answered the question versus a big group and how they answered the question. So we could give you this test and say, well, you obviously can't be an accountant because you answered all the questions different. And some of the questions, I like to do things on the spot of the moment. I am more optimistic than most people. I am always looking for new experiences. So it's this 50-question test that you take, and then they do a bunch of fancy math on it and sort people into groups. And that's the way these dating sites do their screening as well. Maybe you've seen Clark Warren, the guy from eHarmony.com. He was doing his own TV commercials. He's a psychologist, and he claims in his data that the most important things in developing attraction between two people are their intelligence. So he's back in the intelligence camp. So he would say that if two people have radically different intelligence levels, however he's going to measure it, they're wrong for each other. You know, so you could use proxy variables, and we talked about this when we did consumer behavior. Would you marry somebody that doesn't have a college degree? Would you marry somebody that didn't graduate from high school? Would you marry somebody, if you've got a master's degree, that only has a bachelor's? You know, maybe those are proxy variables, but he thinks, according to his data, that there's some intelligence factor that's going on that measures compatibility. Okay, then, third, the skills test. Well, in the NFL, this is where they look at bench pressing and how fast you can run the 40 and your vertical jump and all that kind of stuff. So you go to this thing that they call the combine once a year, and you do these performance tests. You know, it's kind of like an Olympic tryout, basically, where the people run and they jump and they lift weights and stuff like that. Well, okay, that's for the NFL. And again, there are standards. If you can't bench press 200, I guess it's 235 pounds, a certain number of times, you don't fit the profile. You get kicked out, you know, for certain positions. And if you can't run the 40 in a certain time, and you'll hear people quoting those 40 times on the telecast. If you listen today, you'll probably hear somebody mention that so-and-so ran the 40 in 4.23 and it's the fastest on the team. So they really take that seriously in the NFL. Well, how about sales forces? What would be a skills test? Well, in the pharmaceutical industry, maybe the skills test is a chemistry test or a biology test. So they think that's related to the job. And if you're an idiot on chemistry, they don't want you talking to people that are sophisticated. Now, part of it is to see if you can be trained, where you have to have a certain level of skill on, let's say, a chemistry test in order for them to train you. And if you're way low on the test, they just say, oh, this person isn't going to make it. We can't train them. So how would you like to take a high school chemistry test right now? How would you do? Or a high school biology test? You know, unless you're a biology major in college, you wouldn't want to do it. So these are pretty important. Different types of selling jobs might have a different type of test. They might ask you to put a puzzle together, or they might ask you to do something mechanical, you know, to deal with wrenches or tools, depending on the type of selling job. So anyway, those are the three types of things that they measure. They're looking for indicators, just like the NFL is looking for indicators according to that profile that are going to predict who's going to be successful and who isn't. It's important to look at the unsuccessful outcomes as well to figure out what doesn't work. And that's where this quarterback thing comes up. There have been very, very few quarterbacks successful under 6 feet. That's just a red flag if you're short. Okay, then we get into an even more controversial idea, personal characteristics of the people. In other words, demographics. And a lot of this comes from an idea that comes out of psychology called homophily. Is anybody familiar with that? Homophily? It's the idea that you like to associate with people that are like you. They have the same values, the same ideas, the same beliefs, and you gravitate to those type of people. Well, how do you ascertain somebody else's values and beliefs? You have to talk to them. Or maybe there are indicators. You know, maybe they've got a button that says, I went to the University of Wisconsin, or I'm a member of a certain church. Oh, we're buddies. You know, we think alike. But the important thing here is that you think that you're like them. We could have an independent jury say, no, you're nothing like that other person, but you think that you are. That's the idea in homophily. Okay, so this has been adapted to sales situations with an idea called the similarities hypothesis. The similarities hypothesis. And in fact, one of our former professors here, who's retired now, did his doctoral dissertation on the similarities hypothesis. And the idea there is that you want to hire salespeople that are like the people that they're going to be calling on. So you want your salespeople to look like, or act like, or believe like the customer. Okay, so if you believe this, what you're going to do is profile the people that they're calling on. And then you're going to hire salespeople along those same lines. So if all of our customers are fat white guys in their 40s, then we're going to hire salespeople that are fat guys in their 40s. Well, on the surface, this seems discriminatory. And lo and behold, that's what it turned into. It turned into a justification for discriminating against certain groups, women and minorities. Women had been woefully underrepresented in the sales force up until fairly recently. In 1975, which isn't all that long ago, only 5% of professional sellers were women, and 80% of professional sales forces had no women. You see that in sports now too, where you're starting to see women football announcers, women hockey announcers. Never happened before. You know, the thought was we want people that are like the players and maybe former players. Okay, this whole idea really took off about 1975, where this is discriminatory, and it's just using demographics to screen out people that you didn't want to hire. But the rationale was we need salespeople that are like our customers. So we don't want minority salespeople. We don't want women salespeople, because all the customers are men. None of the customers are minorities. That was the idea. Well, to make a long story short, women have made big progress in professional selling, and right now, about half the professional sellers in the United States are women. It's 50-50. There used to be some charts in the book. I read through chapter 20 today, and they've taken those charts out. But it's about 50-50 men and women. And some companies have done some interesting studies on this, Procter & Gamble and IBM, and they found that if you use the same hiring standards and the same training, women are just as successful as men. Now, what was the original prejudice against hiring women? Why wouldn't you want to have women in your sales force? They can't handle rejection. They're not tough enough. They don't like to travel. They've got family situations that keep them from working hard at their job. Some of this is across all jobs, but in selling, because of travel and dealing with entertainment situations, it might be worse. So those were the prejudices that exist. But as I said, these recent studies have indicated that that's not the case. So there's been rough equivalency now with women. Women managers are still underrepresented, and that's probably because it's just fairly recently that women have made inroads into the sales force, and maybe in 10 years the manager situation will balance out. The minority situation is a totally different story. You could look at charts of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and the like. They're woefully underrepresented in professional selling. Some of the big companies like IBM have affirmative action programs to hire more minority salespeople, but they have not made progress as women have. So that's where we stand. And this idea of the similarities hypothesis was used to justify that. Now, if you really want to operationalize the similarities hypothesis, maybe you could do something like hire military veterans, because they're going to be calling on the military. Ideally, what you would do if you're calling on doctors, just hire other doctors. Except they're not gonna quit their medical practice to go and sell pharmaceuticals. So if you can't hire doctors, who can you hire? Veterinarians? Well, they're not gonna quit either. But what's another healthcare group that you might be able to hire? Nurses. Nurses are always complaining about their jobs. They're going on strike, they claim that they're underpaid, overworked, they don't make enough money. Well, the average nurse in Clark County makes $60,000. The average pharmaceutical salesperson makes $90,000. Would you be willing to trade your nursing job for that? How about a high school science teacher? Everybody moans and groans about Clark County schools and the low rate of pay. Would you rather make $40,000 or $45,000 in Clark County schools or $90,000 for the drug company? Well, in fact, one of our faculty members' wives is a science teacher in high school, and I told her she ought to do that. And she said, well, I'd have to give up my summer vacation. Yeah, you have to work at a real job. So, can't have it both ways. But there are ways to try to operationalize this without, totally discriminating against groups based on demographics. Okay, any questions on any of this? Long-winded. We're gonna quickly go through training. Objectives of training. Okay, there's gonna be trade-offs going through all this stuff we're talking about. If you hire experienced people, you don't have to train them as much, but you're gonna have to pay them more. If you hire fresh college graduates, you don't have to pay them as much, but you have to train them more. So one of the objectives of training is to attract and retain good salespeople. And that's what companies pitch when they're on campus interviewing. They'll say, well, we've got a really great training program. And there are companies that are known for that. Xerox is one of them. IBM is another one. The drug companies are others. So that's one of the objectives. Another objective is to make sure that the territory is run well, that the customers are taken care of, that good service is provided. Another objective is to moderate turnover. Not eliminate turnover totally, but keep a lid on turnover, because turnover is a cost too. If you want to skimp on training, maybe you're gonna have more turnover, and the total cost is gonna be greater. So really what you're trying to do is socialize somebody into the company and to bring them up to speed. Planning for training. Well, before you start a training program, and this can range from a small company to these gigantic drug companies, oftentimes what you'll do is give your current salespeople an audit. And by an audit, I mean things like testing their product knowledge, trying to see where they're weak. Look at all the statistics that they provide, see how they're planning their territory, how many calls they make, information from their managers. So maybe you can pinpoint areas where the sales force is weak. Maybe they're weak on product knowledge. Maybe they're weak on selling skills. And then at the very end, when you do the program evaluation, you're gonna try to do a test at the end to see if you improve their product knowledge. Okay, specific training issues. Who gets trained? Well, new hires get trained unless they're have a lot of experience. And there's ongoing training too, and they'll often do this at a trade show, after a trade show, at a sales meeting, at a convention, something like that. So maybe you're already here in Las Vegas for CES and you're gonna take one day, and rent a room at a hotel and do a training session for 8 hours, because everybody's already there. Now, you could do this quarterly, you could do it annually. And what gets trained? Well, that would maybe come out of the audit. What are you weak in? Then it would typically be a lot of stuff on selling skills and product knowledge, motivation, and maybe general skills like organization and listening, which are really important for salespeople. Okay, methods and content. You could do classroom activities, on-the-job training, online training, things like that. Trainers. Big companies have staff trainers, that's all they do. Smaller companies might use district managers to do the training. They're sort of senior salespeople. And another option would be to hire a training company, like Tom Hopkins International. He's currently one of the leading trainers. Here's a brochure from one of his classes. I got comped to go to a 2-day training session. It was very good. Tom Hopkins International. How to gain, train, and maintain a dynamic sales force. Every 10 or 15 years, there's a new sales guru that's out there. There were certain people in the 70s, certain people in the 80s. Tom Hopkins is one of the current people that's well thought of. And of course, they charge a lot of money for these sessions. So you get group discounts and the like. Well, for all of you football fans, who's the last image up here?
Lou Holtz.
Lou Holtz, Dr. Lou. He did this segment on ESPN before they fired him, called Dr. Lou, where he would make various outrageous statements. He's involved in sales training as a motivational speaker. A lot of fired football coaches go into this type of work. You know, former politicians do this too. So it's anybody that's got a good shtick, you know, like Joel Osteen, or we're gonna see Tony Robbins on the next couple slides. So it's motivational speaking. And that's one of the criticisms of training, is it's too much motivational speaking and not enough nuts and bolts. Maybe the all-time best motivational speaker was Herb Brooks. Who can tell me who Herb Brooks is? Coach of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team that beat the Russians. One of the all-time greatest sports upsets. Real enthusiastic guy. And he was on the motivation circuit for a few years after that, making big money. So somebody that's real enthusiastic. Holtz is very enthusiastic. I've never met him in person, but he coached at Minnesota when I was there, just for a couple of years. Well, trends in sales training, obviously online would be one of them. Another would be general skills training, things like listening. And another one would be team selling. We talked about that a little bit last time. Working in teams, you know, have some sort of a group project as part of the training. So if you think you're gonna get away from groups once you get out of school, it's not gonna happen. You know, unless you can find some sort of a job where you sit in a cubicle all day and nobody talks to you. So those would be some of the things in training. Motivation and compensation, quickly. Salesforce motivation, common motivational tools. Money, threats, recognition, contests, speakers. Again, motivation. Every study that's ever been done for the last 100 years on sales indicates that money is the #1 motivator. Every once in a while you'll hear somebody say, well, I'm not really in it for the money, you know, I really like my job and the recognition is good. Baloney, it's all money. That's why people go into sales. #1 is money. #2, threats. Now we're talking fear appeals. We're gonna take away rewards. We're gonna threaten people. We're gonna take your job away. Your kids are gonna starve. You're not gonna be able to make your house payment. Research indicates that threats aren't as effective, but they can be in certain situations. Some sales managers like to hire salespeople that are dependent. They've got 5 kids. They need the job. They need the money. They're going to do whatever the manager tells them. So they can control those people. Okay, recognition. This is stuff like, you know, driving a pink Cadillac for a year, driving a BMW 5 Series for a year, or having one of these pseudo titles like member of the President's Council on Sales, or member of the senior sales marketing team, blah, blah, blah. You know, and you get a pen and pencil set, you know, and a little name tag or something like that. Well, again, this is kind of window dressing, and I don't think it makes much difference. Money is the #1 thing. Contests could be part of this, although really that's a separate topic. We could have an entire lecture on contests. And then lastly, motivational speakers, Tony Robbins. Any questions on any of this? Money is the #1 motivator. Okay, how do you actually do compensation? Well, what are the objectives of your compensation plan? Again, it's to attract good salespeople and hold on to them and minimize turnover while not totally eliminating it, and to ensure that the customer is treated correctly and that you represent the company correctly. And you're gonna take the old laboratory animal approach here, and you're gonna set up a reward system where if salespeople behave in a certain way, they get rewarded. They get a drink of water, they get a piece of cheese. And if they're bad laboratory animals, they get a shock. So that's kind of the way compensation systems are set up. Compensation levels. Now, here we're getting into macro type things as to how much the average salesperson in an industry should make, or the average salesperson in a company should make. And they call those internal and external labor markets. And within the company, should your average salesperson make about the same as an average engineer, an average accountant? That's a decision for top management. If your salespeople are top heavy on the salary scale, it's going to create resentment and jealousies within the company. You know, a lot of people just don't like salespeople, period. Like they don't like lawyers for no good reason. But if the average salesperson in a company is making $100,000 and the average engineer is making $80,000, you know, they probably resent that. So you've got to take those factors into account. And again, there should be a national or at least a regional wage scale for salespeople in a certain industry with a certain level of experience. So you've got to kind of adhere to that. And if you don't, your sales costs as a percentage of sales are going to be way high. And you're going to have problems. But again, there's cost trade-offs. What if you try to pay salespeople on the cheap? What if you're low? Then what happens? More turnover, and that's a cost. Or the people are disgruntled and they're looking for another job. There's all sorts of indicators, if we went into motivation a little bit further, all sorts of indicators about when salespeople are unhappy. So there's a cost trade-off operating. The basic methods are salary, commission, and bonus. Now, some people, as hard as it is to believe, work 100% on salary. Like those missionary salespeople that we talked about, they're often highly qualified, bachelor's degree in engineering or science with an MBA. Highly qualified people. At the other end of the spectrum, even in professional sales, some people are on straight commission. The philosophies on those two are opposed. A salary gives salespeople a level income. You don't want them to get into financial trouble because then maybe they'll quit. They'll find another job. It also is a payment for routine duties, customer service duties. At the other end of the scale, the commission, the more you sell, the more you make. You know, it's a laboratory animal doing the right thing and getting a piece of cheese. There's a link between the behavior and what you're getting paid for. Now, the link could be to sales, it could be to orders, it could be to profits. That's kind of a separate issue. Well, then we've got this thing called a bonus. And it's not just salespeople that get bonuses. Anybody in an organization can get a bonus. And it's usually for a one-time activity or an activity over a period of time where you get that amount. You either make it or you don't. So that's part of your total compensation. Bonuses wouldn't stand alone. They would be in combination with probably salary and maybe commission. But all these methods have weaknesses. So what's the solution? If you've read the book, you know that something called a combination plan is the solution. Right now, about 75% of professional sellers are paid under a combination plan. It's salary plus commission and maybe a bonus. It would vary depending on the industry, depending on the company. But compensation consultants recommend that at least 25% of total income be incentive-based. So if you're making $100,000 a year, 25% of that should be incentives. And, you know, you kind of go back to some of this management stuff. What's your hierarchy of needs? You know, if you're making 100,000, how much harder are you willing to work to make 110? If you're making 120, how much harder are you willing to work to make 150? It's the same for all occupations, really. But in sales, it's just quantified a little bit more, where you can make an unlimited amount of money on commission if you work hard, supposedly. So combination plans are used by about 75% of professional sales force. Implementation issue, administration. Somebody's got to set the rules of the game and keep the books, be a scorekeeper on this. How do you get paid your commissions? When is your salary adjusted? What are the rules for getting your bonus? If a contest is part of this, and that's really a separate issue, what are the rules for the contest? You don't want to change the rules after the game has been played. You want everybody to know the rules up front. Here's how you're going to get paid. Here's your salary. Here's the commission structure. Now, commissions can be flat, they can be progressive or regressive. A progressive commission would be the more you sell, the higher the percentage. A regressive would be the other way, or it could be flat. You get 1% of everything you sell, something like that. Okay, ceilings. This is a controversial idea. People go into sales to make a lot of money, period. What if all of a sudden somebody comes along and says, we're going to cap your income. We're going to put a ceiling on it. You can only make $100,000 a year on commission because we think you got lucky. You got a windfall, and we're not going to pay. Salespeople absolutely hate this, where they cap essentially sales force costs. Now, the reason companies do that is because their sales cost as a percent of total is way out of whack. You can't have a salesperson making $1 million a year. You know, they don't take promotions, they don't take orders from anybody. Now, there are companies that do that, but ceilings are very controversial. And again, it should be stated up front, where once you hit a certain amount, there's no more commissions. What salespeople do then is they play all sorts of little games to try to move orders into the next calendar year. Instead of getting an order in December, they'll push it into January because they know they're not going to get paid for it. So there's all sorts of gamesmanship. That's why this administration and the scorekeeping is really important. Salespeople naturally think that the company is trying to cheat them, that they're trying to cheat them on commissions. Okay, lastly, manager plans. Roughly the same thing applies, except managers are hired to manage. So a higher percentage of their total compensation is going to be from salary. But they also get commissions and bonuses. And if they've got vacant territories, for example, it's going to be very difficult to make those commissions and bonuses. So it really hurts the manager if they've got vacant territories. A typical district might have 10 people under the district manager. If you've got 2 vacant territories, you're not going to make your numbers. It's just not going to work. But all things equal, a manager would make a higher percentage in salary than a regular salesperson. Okay, that was a lot of material. Questions?
75 minutes. I'm into the business. I'm not going to usually 75 minutes. We'll be starting the exam at 8:30. And finishing the exam at 9:45. That is within the window that the registrar has given us. And so, we should have plenty of time after you finish this exam, if you have another exam at 10 minutes past 10 that morning. Does anyone have a 10:10 exam that morning? Okay, couple of us, no. Should have plenty of time between when you finish. Who's that breakfast? Well, before middle of the day. When we, those that don't see what I'm seeing, hold it up. okay to have a vignette in the class? Better. Yeah. And by finishing at 9:45, you have almost a half hour before the next exam due here. And you don't have a whole lot of back-to-back exams. It makes it kinda hard. Ideally, you'll have an exam on Monday, and then one on Tuesday, and then one on Wednesday, and then one on Thursday. That's the theoretical idea. Does anyone have that? That worked out for you this time? Okay. Don't let it spoil you, cause it doesn't happen very often. You know that, okay. For our exam, it will be on chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. There are 5 chapters covered on this exam. Chapter 12, you've already prepared, because you prepared that for the last exam. I think the material in motivation theory is that important that I'm going to be testing it twice. The new material, of course, is just on the last exam. It is not cumulative. That I think makes it a whole lot easier to do that. Any questions on that? If I covered same format? No surprises? I've included a couple of TH questions. Christmas season, I ought to do something for you. Don't we do 40 of those? Yeah, I'm not that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about communication theory this morning, then we'll move into control. On Wednesday, one of the things I'm going to be doing is inviting one member from each of your teams to come to the department, to come to the fun of the class, and take about 15 seconds. Tell us what you did. Tell us what you're accomplishing as a team. I think I mentioned this before, but when I read the papers, and all these, I'm always wishing that I had taken some time in class, so the teams can share what they accomplished, and so this time we're gonna do that. So please have someone selected from your team who will be coming up on the class. Let's talk about communication here again. What's the starting point? The starting step, we always start with an idea. If you don't have an idea, don't worry about communicating it. They're starting to communicate. And so we start with an idea. And ideally, we would just simply transmit that idea from your mind into the mind of the receiver. That way it would be a total communication. There wouldn't be any loss, there wouldn't be any noise. Once again, noise is anything that interferes with the communication process, and there'd be nothing to interfere. Of course, we can't do that. So we have lots and lots of noise occurring. What's the second step? We take this idea and we encode it. Second step is encoding. Figuring out what kind of symbols can we use to transmit the idea. Can we use words? What else? Body language, what else? Tone, inflection. And they still don't get the job done, and that's the frustrating part. They still don't get the job done. Because noise occurs in my selection of the symbols to encode the idea, and in your interpretation of the symbols that you've received, or your choice of symbols, and my interpretation of those symbols. Because a word, same word, does not mean the same to you as it means to me. I'll give an example. The word is overheated. Overheated. What does it mean? Overheated, what does it mean? Okay, in your car, for example, when the thermostat gets too high, the coolant in the radiator is too hot, it is overheated. Las Vegas gets overheated in July and August. Can I tell us we love the heat? Because I know there are weird people. People just love I don't. For me, summertime is the time to get out of town. And so I've always taught summer semester. Because teaching summer semester is kind of fun. Is it fun to take summer semester classes? Because you get in, get done, get out. And a summer semester class. 5 weeks, do everything, you're done. I always found it fun. And then get out of town. Go somewhere where the temperature doesn't get to 150 degrees in the daytime. Las Vegas is overheated. But the word overheated to you does not mean the same as it does to me. Because in my vocabulary, the word overheated is emotionally charged. It is a loaded word. And the loading came from this. My wife and I were married in August. And after we got married, we had a couple of arguments, and I didn't like the arguments. That's not healthy. Discussion's okay, but arguments no. And I figured out that the time we had the arguments is when I was too hot. Now, some people, when they get cold, they get mean. Have you noticed that? This morning, it's not cool out there. Other people, when they get hot, they get mean. That is, a physiological change results in a psychological change. And I was in the latter group. When I got hot, I wasn't very nice. And I realized that the only time my wife and I argued was when I was too hot. And so somehow I could get that message to her. That I was too hot. Let's talk about it later. That things were bad. And so we chose the word overheated. If I could get the word overheated out, that meant leave me alone for a while. Does that make sense? And then when the children came, it meant grab the kids and leave me alone for a while. Because I'll kill them. Has anyone ever wanted to kill me?
And admit it.
Of course, not really kill them, just keep them to death. And it meant grab the kids. And then it turned out, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was when we moved to Las Vegas and we really had hot temperatures, and now I get hot. The physiological change no longer results in the psychological change. But it is still interesting that if someone says the word overheated, they lose it. Because to them it's an entirely innocent word. But Wendy's eyes get a little bit larger, and she looks for the kids still. The kids are gone, but she looks for the kids still. And I'm fascinated by her response, and so I'm no longer listening, and Wendy's no longer listening, and so the communication is slowly stopped. Does that make sense? Because the symbol, the word, does not mean the same to the person who uses it, the sender, as it does to us, the receiver. And words are like that, symbols are like that. I remember when John Kennedy got off the plane in Germany, and to show the people of Germany that he was one of them, he said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." Now someone is an expert in German. "Ich bin ein Berliner." What does that mean? You're a Telnet. What was he trying to say? Let's say it in German.
Ich bin einer von euch would be the direct answer.
Or ich bin Berliner. Like ein Berliner. See, the ein is what apparently threw everything off. Then people just laugh. You idiot. It's like is the Chancellor of Germany? Is that the head? Like the Chancellor of Germany getting off the plane in LaGuardia and saying, "I'm an artichoke." I mean, it's just, the message intent was there, but the message received was not. And there's 1,000 examples like that. Very often, it is the simple use of symbols where the symbol contains a specific message, but the interpretation of the symbol is different. There'll be all kinds of arguments, all kinds of wars, and so on. I call my wife a girl. Does that offend anyone? I offend some people. She's not a girl, she's a woman. I'm sorry. In my vocabulary, girl means female. But in your vocabulary, perhaps girl is not. Does that make sense? Now, in my consulting work, every so often I'll be consulting a doctor or a dentist, and they'll be talking about the girls in the office. And I need to explain that, what you're saying makes sense to me when we're communicating, but it is offensive to them. They are not girls in the office. They are your staff. They are your employees. Or they are the women in your office. And the intent was not to offend, and yet the result was offense. And so we offend for a word, and it's a mistake. Or we take offense for a word. It's just a simple process of encoding the message. Once the message is encoded, then we transmit the message through some kind of medium. And the media that we can choose from includes, bless you, the spoken word. What else, what other kind of media can we use? The spoken word. How else do we communicate?
Email.
Through the written word, emails, texts, tweets. Can I tell us who tweet? Just one. Tweeting is not common among you. It's what?
Like, the antiquated is old. Like
It's
the
old.
drawing from
So what do you use now?
Instagram.
Okay, so I do, Instagram. Okay, several kinds of media. Also, facial expression, also body language. Are you communicating? So visual. And then it's received. And upon being received, first of all, it is filtered. And we filter everything that we receive. Now, most of what we receive is discarded. I'll give you an example. Can you hear the hum of the HVAC system? Can you hear the hum of the heater? Did you notice that before I said anything about it? Now, it's been there. Those that noticed it before I said it. You guys know this. Because we like to listen to heaters, I guess. Most of us, we do. Why not? Because it has those outflows. So we ignore it. It's there. We hear it. Physically, it's there. We hear it. But we ignore it. Because it has no interpretation. If there were a loud bell that started ringing, what would that signify? In this building, if the bell starts clanging, that does not mean recess. It means fire. And every time I've heard it, it's meant fire alarm. Fire drill. Never had a fire. As far as I know. You pay attention to that. When you were coming to work, did you pay attention to people who were honking? Or did you just ignore it? There are so many stimuli we ignore. Visual stimuli, auditory stimuli, olfactory stimuli that bring the smells. But if you're hungry and you haven't eaten for 2 days and you love KFC and you walk by or drive by a KFC outlet, do you know it? Oh yeah, you know it. For many years, KFC owners and franchise owners, it is required by law to have an exhaust fan over your kitchen in a commercial restaurant. The vast majority of those fans are mounted and pointed toward the rear of the building. KFC mounts theirs points into the front of the building. So they literally create a zone of aroma. If you're not hungry, we tend to ignore it. If we're hungry, we tend to pay attention to it. And this is a specific type of filtering. It is called salient filtering. The things that you are looking for, you tend to see. Have you noticed that? Do we hate UNR? Of course. If someone's from UNR, do you view them differently than you do with someone from UNLV? Well, I was true. They're jerks. We're not. How about Russians? Or Germans? Or French? What do you expect from the French? To be weak. Very weak. Yeah. In battle, you can expect the French to retreat. Now that's wrong. But what we expect, we see. Have you noticed that? If I'm one of your employees and you expect me to be a poor employee, I will be. Cause that's what you see. And that's how I am then treated, and then I respond. And we tend to see what we expect to see. And that's part of the probation process. Once it goes through the filters, there are 3 higher level mental processes. Thinking processes. Higher level mental processes. That the communication goes through, and then the one-way cycle, or the one-way has been completed. The first of the 3 is called projection. Projecttion. Projection. Now let me back up 2 steps. I just did that was, when you see what you're expecting to see, that is called response salience. When you see what you need to see, that is called response salience. Part of the program. The projection is the process where we anticipate or project, where we anticipate future value. And we're always analyzing. And we are projecting future value or anticipating future value. I'll give you an example. What I'm about to say is wrong. On purpose. What I'm about to say is wrong. If I tell you the answer to question 17 on the final exam next week is the color yellow. The answer to question 17 is the color yellow. It isn't. It is not. I don't want you to misunderstand. It is not the color yellow. But if I told you today that it was the color yellow, right there, you are projecting future value. It's the answer to one of the questions on the final. It has value. Pay attention, your mind says. Okay, the color yellow, you capture it. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't care. It's the answer to question 17. Your mind says. Because you are projecting future value. Does that make sense? Now something kind of weird will happen. 3 weeks from now, if you and I are talking, and I say, by the way, what was the theoretical answer to question 17 on the final? You will still remember that's the color yellow. Projection is that powerful. Can I see those who remember names really easily? You just have an ability for that. Not a whole lot of hands go up. Can I see those who really have a hard time remembering names? You meet someone, they say their name, 10 seconds later, you don't know their name. That all has to do with projection. If someone told you that the next person you meet, if you remember their name, I'll give you $10,000. Will you remember their name? Yeah, forever you would remember their name. Because you project. For most communication, what do we do? Most communication, in terms of projection, we project how much value. So most communication is lost. Because we discard it. And rationally so. There is enough for us to remember. We don't need to remember everything. In fact, we don't need to remember half of the things. In fact, we don't need to remember 10% of the things we hear. So 90% is just discarded because of rejection. Does that make sense? Second step. Goes right alongside rejection. It is called abstraction. Abstraction is pulling meaning out of the symbol. In fact, it could be argued that abstraction occurs before projection. But projection occurs so fast that sometimes we don't even finish abstracting because we project little value. So they really do go hand in hand. Abstraction pulling meaning out of the symbol. Kind of interesting. If we are trying to abstract, pull the meaning out of the communication, and we're having a difficult time doing it, what do we do most of the time? If abstraction is difficult, most of the time, what do we do with rejection? We reject low value. If I don't understand it, it can't have high value. Do you understand that logic? If I can't understand it, it can't have much value. Can you see how dumb that logic is? Sometimes the things that are the most difficult to abstract end up having really high value. Therefore, it makes sense to work at the abstraction. Can I see those for whom mathematics is easy? These are so easy, and these are our accounting people, right? Those for whom it's not. And the rest of you are asleep. Let's do it one more time. Those for whom math is easy. Okay. Those for whom it's not. Okay, now we're getting some hands. So I talk to those whose hands went up separately. Those for whom it is not easy. It is not easy because you are not as smart. Boy, I'm in hot water now. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with background. Most knowledge is not sequential. But math is. You need to know how to count before you can add. You need to know how to add before you can multiply. Does that make sense? If you weren't taught well how to add, then multiplying is hard. If you were taught well how to add, multiplying is easy. And the sequential relationship continues. You need to know basic math in order to do algebra. If you haven't been taught basic math well, algebra is really hard. Not because you're not smart, but because you haven't been taught correctly. You need to know algebra in order to be able to do geometry well and trigonometry well, and you need to know those fields in order to do calculus well. And calculus can either be really hard or really easy. Depending on your background, not your intelligence. difficulty in math, don't blame you. Blame the teachers that didn't teach you correctly. I'll share an example. I had the opportunity of teaching calculus many years ago. And I realized there were two ways to teach calculus because I had seen it happen. The first way to teach calculus is to make it so hard that none of your students can understand it, and they will be just amazed by how intelligent you are because you can understand it. Stupid way of doing it. The other way is to teach calculus and make it so easy that everyone can understand it. And it was my goal to do it the second way. In fact, it was my goal at the end of the term to have my students come to me and say, you know, I was kind of afraid of calculus, but it's so easy. I don't know, I was afraid of it. Because calculus is easy. Compared to algebra, calculus is easy. If you have the background for it. Does that make sense? And that leads us into the third of the higher level mental processes. The first is projection, the second is instruction, the third is assimilation. Assimilation is linking the new information that you have with the information you already know. Assimilation is linking the new information with information you already know. And the more you know, the easier it is to assimilate new information in the same field. I asked this question before, but can I see those who know at least 3 languages? At least 3 languages, because I've discovered something. If you've learned 3 languages, then learning the 4th is easy. Or a lot easier. Can I still want those who've learned 4 languages? Am I right? Why? Why is the 4th language so much easier?
There's lots of links with languages. You can find when you start to learn more languages. There's kind of connection. Some words are the same in different countries.
Sometimes the words are the same, but there's always the construction of language. By the time you've learned 3 languages, you've learned the construction of language. You've learned that there is a noun or a predicate. You've learned that there is a verb. And so to communicate, you need the noun and the verb. Now sometimes you might want to modify the noun, and so we have adjectives in every language. And sometimes you might want to modify the verbs, we have adverbs in every language. And it's almost second nature by the time you've learned 3 languages. You know that. So all you need to do is find the verb that you need, and find the noun that you need, and find the modifiers that you need, and you can communicate. Does that make sense? That's assimilation. Mentally, you have developed this construction ability to be able to add more information. And that's true for almost any subject. Have you found the same? So, of all the people in the world, whom do you feel the sorriest for? In terms of learning. I feel the sorriest for the people who have no learning, no constructs, no established ability to link new information with old information, because they don't have any old information, and those people are called Democrats. or Republicans, whichever. But these people are called babies. Can you imagine how frustrating it would be to be a baby? Why aren't they more frustrated? Well, they are. They cry every day. No, they don't. Love for that. See, they're not aware of what they're missing, and so they can't get frustrated because it's missing. Does that make sense? The more management you know, the easier it is to learn more management. The more marketing you know, the easier it is to learn more marketing. The more accounting you know, the more easier it is to learn more accounting. Does that make sense? An adventure is learning something you've never learned before. And some of us are very hesitant to ever move into that new territory. But I'll share with you, it's fun. I'll give you an example. When I turned 65, I decided it was time to learn something new. And on all of your fives, 25, 35, 45, 55, and so on, I would challenge it, learn something new. So when I turned 65, I looked around at all the things I didn't know that I would like to learn, and I decided I would like to learn how to paint in oils. And I knew nothing about it. And that was going on 5 years now. And in the last 5 years, I've probably painted about 500 paintings. And they're on sale for $10,000 a piece now. And if I sold many at 10,000, no, but when I give one away, I tell the person I'm giving it now, it's for 10,000. Because I won't sell it for less. So we have fun with that. But I've learned so much about painting because I made the decision to learn something new. Does that make sense? I would challenge you to do so. But assimilation is the process of linking the new information with the information you already have. If you already have a lot of information, it's a lot easier to create the logic of that thinking. Now, all of the things you've ever learned and your analysis of all of those things and your interpretation of all of those things and your interpolation of all of those things constitute your total body of knowledge, your own personal total body of knowledge. We have a name for that. That is called your world image. Your world image is the total knowledge that you've learned over your lifetime, along with all of the analysis and interpolation and interpretation, all of that goes with it. World image. Now there's a portion of your world image that is the most significant portion. That is all the things you learn. There is a segment of that, or a portion of that is more important than any other of the information you learn. What portion is that? What is the most significant portion of your world image? I'll give you a hint. It's the information that you learned about you, which is called your self-image. So let's talk about your self-image, because that's an important part of management. Your perception of you. Your your self-image drives your behavior. If your self-image is high integrity, and one of you, by the way, demonstrated very high integrity to me this morning. I've already gotten back to you, and I won't name any names or anything else, but I'm impressed. I love it. I love high integrity. And if part of your self-image is high integrity, then that drives your behavior. Does that make sense? If part of your self-image is kindness, that drives your behavior. If part of your self-image is racing to be on class on time, you got a reason, right?
Yeah,
45 minutes late?
I just got back from Arizona.
Okay, and I just got back from Alaska, but I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're here. Whatever your self-image is. If your self-image is that you are shy, you will be shy. If your self-image is that you are outgoing and gregarious, you'll be outgoing and gregarious. Your self-image drives your behavior. If your self-image is that you are dumb, that drives your behavior. If your self-image is that you're fat, that drives your behavior. Where do you get your self-image from? What is the origin of your self-image? And when does your self-image stabilize? First of all, where does it come from? Comes from today, it may be coming from your experience, environment, and so on. But I'll ask that other question first. When does your self-image stabilize? Psychologists suggest at the age of about 5. About 5, you have established a self-image. So where does the information come from establishing your self-image? Your parents. And your brothers and sisters if you have them. And friends. And from that rectangular electronic device. Not electronic social media. My 5-year-old is still not. Television. And stupid television. Like what? Like Sesame. You watch that? Talk about a socialistic propaganda development. Actually, cartoons. Did you watch cartoons when you were little? Oh yeah, yeah. And your parents weren't watching you, so they watched stupid cartoons. And they're really bad. First of all, I cannot tolerate cartoons. This high squeaky false voice just drives me crazy. But I don't think I told this class the story. When my wife and I went on vacation with our grandchildren, I tell you a story. see, they were learning that if you cry, you'll get your way. And how long does that stay with you? How long does that knowledge stay with you? For the rest of your life. We have some friends. And the wife in this couple told my wife that she has learned that if she cries, her husband will give her anything she wants. She learned from SpongeBob. I hate dumplings. Anyway, stabilize at 5. How accurate was your self-image at 5? How analytic were you at 5? How introspective were you at 5? You were this wonderful little sponge, just bringing in everything and holding it. Weren't you? And that's why when I hear a mother telling her little girl, "You're fat," I feel like picking up that mother and throwing her against the wall. Okay, what a stupid thing to say. Because how long will that little girl know that she's fat? Forever. And is she fat? Maybe, maybe not. And what's wrong with being fat? Have you thought about that? Nothing. Except in our martial arts culture. And that self-image will lead to behaviors that may be destructive. Like what? Eating disorders, particularly among young females. And those eating disorders can lead to death. Ever hear of Karen Carpenter? If you've never heard some of Karen Carpenter's music, you owe it to yourself to listen. Phenomenal vocalist, wonderful singer. She died from anorexia. Because someone told her she was fat. Was she? No. And if she was, is that terrible? No. But she thought it was. And she believed them and developed a significant eating disorder that led to her death. Horrible. Or you look at your child and say, "You're dumb." How long does the child hang on to that self-image? Forever. And in school, what do? They do the things that they think a dumb kid will do. And so let me suggest this. If your child fell out of the ugly tree and had every branch coming down, you still tell that child that they are beautiful. Lie to your kid, that's right. If your little boy is dumb as a log, you still tell him he's so smart. And he will incorporate smart as part of self-image. He will act smart when he becomes smart. Does that make sense? So as a grandfather, I use that all the time. Does it work? People, especially children, will live up or down. Your self-image is basically correct, because by now you have corrected it. there are still mistakes in it. And I challenge you to review, be open-minded, and review the mistakes that are in your self-image and correct them. Now that you're adults. Let me give you an example. I'm getting done as I go. I talked about this example. I have thought so. When I was 5, my father built an Arctic Circle drive-in restaurant. And he was my hero. And he just made money, it was like a gold mine. And with that money, he and my mother decided to build a house. Now, they didn't build it, they became owner contractors. And between the time when my father was spending on the restaurant and building the house, he wasn't home a whole lot. And he was my hero. I loved spending time with my hero. And one week, I was able to convince him, next Saturday, to take me to the restaurant with him. Not the restaurant. Take me to the house with him. Let me help with the house. And he said yes. Couldn't wait for Saturday to come. I got up early. I have no idea, children don't know how early is. Probably 3 in the morning, maybe 5, I don't know. I went in their room and I shook his shoulder and he woke up. And I said, Dad, it's Saturday. Let's go. And bless his heart, he got up and we went. And the first thing we did was went to breakfast somewhere. And then we went to my house. Now when you're 5, you want to help. When you're 15, you don't want to help. But when you're 5, you want to help. So I convinced my dad to let me help him. And I kept bugging him and saying, Dad, what can I do to help? And finally he gave me a white rag. And he said, go in the kitchen and clean the kitchen sink. And I could handle that. That week, apparently the plumbers had installed the sink. No running water, but they installed the sink and so I could clean it. And I got it really clean, shining, except for this one little black mark. And I couldn't get it. And the more I scrubbed on it, the bigger it got. What was it? Little dot of plumber's grease. And with a dry rag, the more I scrubbed on it, the bigger it got. And the more angry I got. Now, when I was we had a family moving in next door with teenagers who took delight in teaching that cute little 3-year-old how to swim. And they taught me every word they knew. And I was a good student. And I was able to put those words together in really creative ways that really offended adults. And so I walked in the room where my father was working, and I looked at him and I just unloaded. He should have picked me up and bounced me against the wall. We said that the time on that one. But he didn't, he just smiled at me. And he said, if you weren't so lazy, you could probably do it. And I still remember those words. If you weren't so lazy, you could probably do it. And my father was my hero. Not my wife, I won't answer. The only one more important than you is my wife. He was my hero. learned I'm lazy. And that was part of my self-image for the next 23 years. And one night, my wife and I were talking, and I'd been given another job opportunity, an additional job opportunity. That was a good one. And I said, you know, if I weren't so lazy, I would probably do it. And she said, wait a minute, let me describe another person. And she described a person that was on the faculty of 2 major universities. He was writing a book. He was involved with his church. He was involved with the community. He was doing a lot of those kinds of things. And she said, does that sound like a lazy man? And of course, she was describing me. And logically, based on my behavior, I was not lazy. But self-image was lazy. And you see the disconnect. And that day, I corrected my self-image. And I still do a lot of work, and I still got involved with a lot of organizations and so on. But I did not perceive myself as lazy. I challenged my own self-image, and I changed it. And I challenge you to do the same. As part of your world image, that self-image. So that completes the communication process. It starts with thinking and ends with thinking. Does that make sense? We create a thought, then we encode it, and then we transmit it. It goes through filters, and then it goes into the higher level mental processes that are thinking. Now, is it possible to communicate without thinking? Can you do that? Do you do that? With whom? With your brother. Because there's just so much that you can handle. Talking about the things that she wants to talk about. And so you're there. But mentally, where do you go? You go to the Bahamas for a while. So you just take a vacation, so you come back often enough to kind of know what she's talking about, but you're not there. Women, do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you do it. When? When he's talking about sports. When he's talking about the play in the last football game. And you so mentally, you go away. And go shopping somewhere, I don't know. But you come back often enough to be able to say, And is real communication taking place? No, real communication cannot take place without the starting. Questions about communication? Let's shift gears. The final subject for our class is control. And I like to talk about control in terms of what's involved, what is normally done, and what should be done in an organization. Okay, any control process enables the manager to be aware of what is happening, and when changes or corrections need to occur, the manager can make those changes. So let's talk about a control system. And the control system that I like to talk about is one that you've been familiar with most of your life, and that is the thermostat model control. Has everyone turned on the heat by now? Those that still haven't turned on the heat in their house. Really, because it's just not cold enough, huh? It has to go at least below 30 for you to do that. Don't you love the smell of the heat when you first turn it on? To me, that's just an autumn smell, when all of the dust is burned and so on. But with a thermostat, what are some of the elements? When you walk out to a thermostat, what do you see? You see, okay, there's something that can select between heating and cooling. What else? A temperature gauge. And the temperature gauge is a meter. It's a thermometer. Is that what we call it, a thermometer? Or a thermometer? Yeah. So all thermostats have a thermometer. And what else? Okay, some kind of fan control. Anything else? So there's the thermometer that measures the actual. But what else is there? See, there's some way, a dial or a readout of some kind where you can set the temperature where you want it to be. And so if the thermometer says 60 degrees and you want to set it for 70 degrees, then the 70 degrees is the standard. All control systems have a standard. And the 60 degrees is the actual. All control systems measure the actual. So those are two things that all control systems do. Set the standard and measure the actual. Now, if I told you the assignment was to go up to the thermostat in your house and just rip it out of the wall, that is not the assignment. But if it were, what else would you see? What's behind the thermostat? Wires. And if you touch those wires, what might happen? Nothing. Because what is the voltage in those wires? Does anyone know? Okay, that's a 12-volt system. A thermostat is a 12-volt system. And you might get a little tingle, I don't know. But it's not going to electrocute you. But then those wires go through the walls of your house to the thermostat, to the air conditioning and heater system. What is the voltage of your air conditioner? Does anyone know? Okay, that's a 220-volt system. So if you hang on to the wires of a 220-volt system, what happens? Won't kill you most of the time. When I was in college, one of my first jobs, I was working in a laser research laboratory. We were building an argon laser. It was a 220-volt laser. I was underneath the laser, wiring it. And the clown PhD student that I was working with flipped the switch. And so I had both of the wires in my hands, and that 220 volt literally picked me up and threw me across the room. After which I got up and killed the PhD student. But you don't want to mess with 220 volts. 12 volts, you play with. Or 5. So you want to play with 12 volts?
On a 12 battery?
Yeah. Yeah, or on a 9-volt battery. Give it a little bit of a shake. Yeah, that's a cheat. That's a cheat. Yeah. But all control systems have some way to communicate. That's what the wires do. All control systems have some way to communicate that a change needs to occur. All control systems have the equivalent of an air conditioning system, or some way of causing the change to occur. Typically in organizations, that is the employees that enable the change to occur. And all control systems have one more thing that is called a variance. And a variance is a decision how far away from the standard is still acceptable. In a company, if the goal for the profitability is $200,000, and if we're $190,000, is that okay? And if the answer is yes, then that's within the variance that's been established in the control system. If it's not, then it's outside the variance. When the difference is inside the level of the variance, nothing happens. When it goes outside the variance, then some kind of corrective action needs to occur. Does that make sense so far? So your thermostat has a variance built in. And typically it's a 1 degree variance. So if you set the thermostat at say 70, and the temperature goes down to 69.5, what happens? Nothing, because it's within variance. But if it goes down to 69, what happens? Nothing, it's within the variance, because the variance is 1 degree. But if it goes down to 68.5 degrees, what happens? So that's outside the variance, and corrective action needs to take place. Okay, we're gonna stop at this point. We'll finish the discussion of